All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. This is actually part two. We just had some technical difficulties with the episode What Are DMT Entities with our buddy Jack from the TripWhip channel. What's going on, Jack?
Not much. Good to be back after doing a little teaser.
We're doing 15 episodes in a day, so
Yeah.
This is actually our third episode in one day. I mean, it's crazy. Um, but no, whatever stuff happens. I knew at some we actually had never had that happen, so I knew at some point it was going to happen. But I'll keep the first part of the video up. I'll just cut the very end off when you were getting cut off. But so we were talking about where we left off at the last episode was we were talking about these entities possibly being a barrier in between our reality, or maybe even just they're there and we just can't perceive them,
Yeah.
right now.
I think that's possible because what's going on in the mind sometimes I think it manifests itself into our experience. So if you're feeling down all of a sudden, like you're feeling depressed or something like that, your outside world is against you. And people are saying things that trigger you, and all of a sudden, it's just a whole different reality to the one you exist in when you're on a better mindset. I think that can be applied to when you're tripping. When you're, I think if you're not quite, I don't know, if the DMT hasn't kicked in as hard as it's going to kick in, if you're like kind of peaking and it's getting higher and higher, the entities that you encounter or your experience seems to manifest in a way that it's kind of drawing you in. And I think if you meet the entities, if you're still encountering entities, then you're probably not as far as you can go. Like that's the one step further than that is the near-death experience. So I think and that does make sense as well, because I think entities, the experience of entities is highly tied into our ego. As I said, and to you guys in part one, the experience of an entity is possibly like when you look at a cloud, you see faces in it, and when you see a tree, sometimes you can see faces. It's called pareidolia. It's a what I believe it's a side effect of a filter we have in our head that has been
Yeah.
programmed through our evolution to recognize faces and create individuals out of all of the energy that's around us for practical reasons, probably. But obviously, that system of interpreting our reality and our environment has played into identifying what ourselves are as well. We recognize ourselves as one of those things that we see as an individual, as a being. So when you're in these deep psychedelic realms, I guess, and your ego is still intact, then your filter for interpreting entities is still also intact a little bit as well, but it's being affected. And that's why you're seeing strange entities, possibly. Like this is just, at the same time, I do also think what you're seeing is kind of real as well, just as real as what you see when I see another person. That's a real experience. That's a real person. But it still is probably an experience being filtered through this thing that creates pareidolia. So, yeah, I think the entities, if you're still experiencing them, that would make sense. That your ego is still intact and it is this barrier from the next thing that's to come. Yeah, I think that's a good theory, actually.
And just for our listeners who don't know what pareidolia is, it's like it's how our mind connects the dots in certain ways. Like if you look up at a cloud, it's not a bunny, but it might look like a bunny because the way that your mind is observing this thing. So, there's people that look at like ancient hieroglyphs, and there's certain things that look like certain things that aren't necessarily that. So like it's one of those things where it's your mind kind of playing a trick on you. But what you're saying is this could be our mind playing a trick at a much higher level than just
Sure.
looking at a cloud. It's looking at
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. I think that trick is the human experience, essentially. And I don't want to go as far to say that everything's an illusion or whatever, because I think, if you kind of take that stance, where does that stop? Like you can then say
right.
that your own feelings of emotions and stuff are illusions, and you can get into a real nihilistic place. And I don't think nihilism is in any degree a taste of truth. But it is, it's it's a confronting thing to try and interpret these experiences, and I think I start talking like this when I'm trying to communicate them to people who have never experienced deep psychedelic states, because otherwise, if I was just talking to another person who's been there, I'm saying, yep, this entity I encountered, he was like this, he told me this, he was a benevolent being, all these sort of things. I'm not getting down to the logistics of whether or not he's real, because I don't get down to the logistics of whether or not another person I meet is real. But we get caught on this because I am constantly talking to people who have not had psychedelic entity encounters.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's one of those fascinating topics. I would consider it probably one of the you know greater mysteries of life currently at
Yeah,
this. Along with near death experiences and
Well, yeah, it's
it's
all connected, dreams and all that stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, yeah, we have an idea physically what's going on, but I don't think most of the things that we're talking about are byproducts of something that is physical. Otherwise, we would have probably found it by now. Even some of the greatest minds, over time. I'm not, maybe that isn't the case. Maybe it is a byproduct of something physical. But if that is the case, then I think we will know sooner than later, if that makes sense, because we
yeah,
are investigating, all the psychedelic research. If there's some sort of hole or something, like we can find out, oh, this is actually your brain doing this and this is why. I
yeah,
think we'll know sooner than later, now that this psychedelic, revolution,
Oh,
if you
yeah.
will, is happening.
All
But
the
yeah,
nuggets of truth will come squirting out.
yeah, yeah.
you sick bastard. um but yeah, so when you encounter do you have, like, did you ever have an experience where you encountered the same entity twice, or the same energy, or something along those lines?
Yeah. The machine elves are the only ones. I think I'd seen them once when I'd taken LSD with a couple of my friends, and this is like back when I was just kind of in that recreational stage where I didn't know what the fuck I was doing with my life. Take some LSD, just kind of chill out, have some fun, and this acid was just way stronger than any other acid I'd had before. And all of a sudden, my friends are trying to shut me up because I'm talking about these like beings who are controlling us, our human bodies as puppets, and all sorts of like random crazy shit. And and then after that night, I just kind of forgot about the experience entirely. And I was like, okay, don't know what that was about. That was pretty intense acid. And I think probably a year went by until I think I mixed LSD and shrooms. And then I was having, the very first time I did it, I was getting in contact with the same experience. It wasn't an entity encounter at this point. It was just like, I'm seeing this thing and I don't know what it is, but it's like, have you guys seen The Adjustment Bureau?
No, I haven't.
No, I don't think I have.
I'll
What
check
is
it
It's
out
it?
though.
it's like this movie where basically there are these guys who I can't really remember, but um, there's like this big story that's going on, and these guys just pause the story and they go through and they like change some things, like they'll move a person's arm and then they'll
Okay.
walk out of the scene and click play. I kept getting like glimpses at like this place, and I was like, I don't know what this is. And then finally, I did like 3 tabs of acid, and that's I started. Right, it was a very intense one. I started running through the streets naked, and
Jesus.
like,
Through
yeah,
the
I
corridor.
was, yeah. It was crazy because all of a sudden I was in this place that I'd seen little glimpses of before. And I was like, I was running to all my neighbors, and I wasn't talking to my neighbors anymore. I was talking to this thing that was like behind the mask of my neighbor. And they were all coming, like all my neighbors in real life were coming up to like calm me down. They were like, Jack, like, are you okay, man? And I thought they were all coming up to congratulate me. Like, congratulations, you're seeing us now for the first time. Welcome.
Yeah.
Like I was on a whole different place. And then, yeah, what happened is that night, actually, I was listening to voices in my head, basically, that was saying, explaining what was going on. And they said to me that once you go back inside, you're going to have a powerful near death experience. Or they just said, you're going to go inside and you're going to have an ego death and turn into white light. And they were very specific on that, very specific. And I was like, okay, this sounds kind of scary. And they were like, it's okay, relax, you'll be fine. But it's going to be very intense. It'll be the most intense thing you've ever gone through before. And I was just a bit too scared and I didn't go back inside. And so what happened is a neighbor called an ambulance. They picked me up and I went to hospital, and that was the end. I never turned into white light or anything that night. But then 2 weeks later, I took DMT inside my room. And then I saw the voices that had been talking to me. I saw them embodied in a form, the machine elves. And then they took me to the white light, had that white light experience. And funnily enough, as the white light experience was finishing, I actually remember like coming to into my body, and I thought I was running through the streets naked again. Like I was looking around and I was naked, and I was like, oh, fuck, like somehow during this DMT trip, I've stripped down and done the same thing again. But then I realized that I was actually in a memory of the LSD trip. And as soon as I realized that, the whole environment crumbled and shifted, and all of a sudden I was in another memory, and it just kind of kept jumping memories until I was back into the sober reality. And it was fucked. Like each memory was just as real as the next, and just as real as right now. So that definitely challenged my notions of what right now is. But yeah, it was pretty cool. There was like some weird interface between time happening during the LSD and the DMT experience. Like it took me to a place that does not exist in linear time. It was like this outside area. Like if you imagine the time difference, the time reality difference between an audience and the movie they're watching, like the movie has a linear time, but the audience can click pause, they can click rewind.
Yep.
And yeah, it was like I was entering the audience's reality and then back into the movie reality, which is right now.
Time's a funny thing for sure. Time. I mean, because look, I mean, have you ever had an experience? I'm trying to think. There's been a couple times. One time I was driving, it was icy and cold, and I was going like 80 on the highway, and there was a deer slowly walking out onto the highway, and you're supposed to hit him, supposedly, drive right through him. I made the quick decision to make a little ooh, ooh, and went right around it, and it worked out, but time like slowed down to the point where I had the vision and the acumen to pull off that maneuver when normally when I think about it, I'm like, how would I have done that? Like, so I think, I don't know. I think time, we know too that gravity changes time. So like they do this experiment called the atomic clock where they'll drop two clocks at two different altitudes. And when the one falls, basically the more gravity, the slower time is. So we're actually, our gravity's pretty heavy on this planet. I don't know how compared to other planets, but I know you're lighter on the moon and stuff too, so time probably moves a little bit quicker on the moon.
Yeah, I know very little about time. I know that like with a study like that, you can see that there is this real thing. There's this real like time reality or something.
Right.
And that can be affected by gravity. And then there's time dilation is a thing where you can
that's what I was describing. Yeah,
where you can just take like a little bit of DMT or something, and all of a sudden 5 minutes becomes 2 hours.
Like, right. A lot of psychedelics do that. You take mushrooms, it's your whole night seems like a week.
Yeah, it's true.
So any of the psychedelic stuff.
What's that?
It says any of that psychedelic seems to take away that filter that's.
I mean, you could even smoke pot. Like if you hadn't been smoking in a while, or it was the first time in a while, something like that. I mean, you can get that effect too. I remember one of the first times I smoked, I was like, the whole night felt like a week. Seriously, like it felt like this, like a movie. Like when you watch a movie of some high school kids' experience, that's what my first time felt like. And I remember we went to Chuck's house, I think. Well, I had smoked before. But this is the first time I remember like actually the experience of it, so
yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's weird to think about for sure, because time you keep, there's this constant, but really, I mean, it's not even perfect. Even the way our calendar and our actual minutes and hours work, we have to, that's why we've got weird stuff like leap year and daylight savings and all these different things. This is to like accommodate the idea of time, basically. So
true. Yeah, very weird.
But so back to the gist of things here. Now I want to know, you're based on your personal experience, do you believe one way more than the other? Like, do you believe that these entities are more likely not, or more likely than not, a physical manifestation of something happening in your brain? Or do you think more likely than not that there is some sort of energy or field out there that we just can't perceive?
I think it's possible that those are one and the same. I think that what everything out there is happening in here. I guess that makes me a solipsist because, you know, it's like, you know, the belief that you can't experiencing anything that's beyond yourself.
Right.
But I guess if I said, do I believe that these entities are real? I would have to say yes. I think they are as real as any encounter I've had with a human being. When I'm there, I really do, and it sounds crazy, but I do get the sense that they are realer. And it feels crazy to say that, and it feels almost scary to say that. But yeah.
When people say they know them too, is it a know them like how you were saying it could be your subconscious? Like, is it a know them like, oh, I know what that is, or oh, that might be something I have within me too, or something, or is it a feeling like that's a separate thing?
So
But
when you say no, do you mean like when they encounter
okay,
them and they know?
so yeah, so like, does it seem like they are part of like you, like your subconscious, like you're saying, or does it feel like they are something completely different that you're
Yeah.
interacting with, if that makes sense?
Honestly, man, it's freaky. It's from my experience, it's like you become one of them, and it's like the guy who's talking to you right now. I remember I thought of this story idea, whereas like these guys are driving, or like these guys, let's say these aliens make these biomechanical body suits to adjust to a new planet, and it's like these are super advanced biosuits that they even like they're little mini aliens driving these biosuits around, and they even use the biosuits to talk and communicate to one another. But without them realizing, these biosuits get so advanced that the biosuits begin to communicate to each other as well, like just the biosuits alone. So when the aliens are talking to one another through the biosuits, like the biosuit communicating has also created its own level, its own ego. And that's what it feels like is happening, is that we are these biosuits, we are these egos that are actually just containing some deeper intelligence. And when you take this DMT, you get transferred from your ego to the deeper intelligence. And that deeper intelligence recognizes all of these machine elves or these other entities. It's like, hey, you know, my biocomputer is going through this thing right now. How do I resolve it? Has this chat, and then all of a sudden I become my ego again. It's like you just feel your mask, which is me, getting pulled off, and that's the experience. And it's so hard to bring anything back because you just can't remember what's going on when you have been pulled off.
Yeah, that's like the ancients would say, the lifting of the veil. You know, you basically, you're being initiated into truth or something on the verge of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, like, I don't want to go and say that it is like, because I don't know, it does feel this way, but I don't want to go ahead. Like a lot of people will say, oh, you want to know what's really going on in the universe? Smoke DMT.
Yeah,
and
no.
Yeah. It's like, no, like this, like we have no idea, but it definitely feels like you know something else when you smoke that DMT.
Yeah.
Well, or you take a high dose of acid or something.
So, and we've talked about this too before. Didn't you also say sometime, you know, one of your experiences that you had a feeling or you saw something about like a brain in a vat or 3 brains in the vat or something along those lines?
Yeah, that was actually on weed.
That was on weed.
Yeah,
good stuff, man. What's going on over there?
It must have been that legal weed that really gets you
that down under.
No. I wish we had that stuff. No,
no, you don't. You don't wish you had that stuff.
Oh man, it was a hectic. I hadn't smoked weed for a long time, and I was like, "Fuck, let's." I was actually, I think, did I? No, I didn't film it. I just felt like doing a meditation on weed, and yeah, it ended up going very, very deep, and it just felt like it was filling in these gaps that I had about the whole machine elf theory stuff, and then eventually took me to this place where it's like, okay, um, you're like this body in, yeah, like a scene from the Matrix. Basically, it was like you're plugged into something, and then that mind is being shot through. Your consciousness is transferred into this ultralight beam, and that ultralight beam is being connected to all sorts of different parallel universes. That's what I was explaining. So it's like at the root of it, you know, when I had my near death, or like if someone has a near death experience, or when I had the white light DMT experience, you know, you get taken back to this white light, and then the weed was kind of showing that this white light might be like this stream of consciousness that is part of the matrix interface, which is just connecting another person's consciousness, the thing that's interfacing with the matrix system, to different parallel universes. That's what it was showing. And then I think there were three guys in that scene. It was like two guys watching the guy plugged in, or three guys watching the guy plugged in, something like that. But yeah, it
Sounds like
was
a
very
weird
vague.
porno.
Yeah, could be.
No, it
Could
actually
be.
sounds like a David Lynch movie or something, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's cool.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I've had some weird experiences meditating as well, for sure. I mean, even more psychedelic than psychedelics, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
But maybe not DMT. Obviously, I've never done it, so I can't compare it. But all the other ones, you know, I would definitely say you can get to a good place meditating that would be similar or along
yep.
the same lines.
Well, don't you
I agree.
think you might be tapping into DMT? Don't you create it
Okay,
naturally?
so that was yeah, Maurice sent me this video a while back. It was an Asian guy on London Real. He was like a monk or trained under somebody, I forget, but his master, if you sit um in a dark room for 7 days or something like that straight, like no light, you can start to produce DMT naturally, and um that's what he was talking. I mean, you should find this video on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
pretty
see if I can
interesting.
find
This guy's real charismatic too. Yeah, don't pull it up though, because
No, 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 I
we'll
know.
get booted. Um, but yeah, so but yeah, this guy's talking about how, I mean, that's interesting too. The dark. I mean,
Mm.
it might, it might. I don't know.
I think it probably
I
can.
know
Yeah,
people that have gotten locked in cars for days at a time start to hallucinate too. I know Maurice has
really.
talked about that too. Yeah, if you lock yourself in a car for a few days, you'll be tripping your ass off.
I
Yeah.
might have to do a little experiment for TripWhip.
If you're gonna do an experiment though, do the 7 day one, and then we'll report back and see what's going on with that.
That sounds pretty cool. I might even try it, to be honest.
I
If I
found
accept.
it.
Yeah.
If
I
you
found
dude,
the video.
if you live streamed that for 7 days, you would probably be the most popular person on
I'll bring
YouTube,
my
I
whole
think.
camera crew down over there and we'll film up, man.
But then it'd be, I mean, I couldn't have any light on my computer while I live streamed. Like
That's
it'd have to
true. It's
be,
black, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to
yeah,
be pitch black.
yeah, just pitch black screen for 7 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean that they could do it. I mean, they could do if somebody would subject themselves to that, they could probably do some real experiments on that kind of stuff. But
I tell you what, man, I wouldn't mind trying it. It'd be pretty interesting if I had my food and all that ready, and if I could last.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to know what would happen. It'd be very
Well, you
interesting.
can last just like being blind for 7 days.
well,
Yeah, true.
here's the other thing too. Have you ever, like, sometimes I'll lay down and I'll try and go to bed. Sometimes sometimes I have bad insomnia and I can't go to bed. Um,
Mm.
so sometimes I'll just lay there in the dark. And once you've been laying like in the complete, you know, dark for a couple hours, just, you start to, like, yeah, I could see that happening after 7 days where I don't see things, but I could see where it would lead to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Like, especially if I wasn't moving around, like when you're lying down in bed and you don't move,
Yeah.
that shit's surreal. So if I was like laying in the darkness for 7 days and just every now and then kind of like moving around, that'd be pretty freaky, I reckon. That'd be pretty freaky. But
well, this video I found when I was talking about it says actually you got to do it for 3 weeks. So
Oh my
3 weeks.
God. Oh my God.
That upped it.
Damn, I don't know if I could do 3 weeks.
I'll send you the link though. You can check it out and see what you think.
That is crazy. 3 weeks. Oh my gosh.
Hey,
I
man,
mean,
Ray Charles, man. That's all you got.
but I guess these monks,
Yeah.
I mean, they do crazy stuff like that. They go on like, they'll fast for a couple weeks, weird stuff like that, or, but 3 weeks in complete
That's
dark.
more dangerous than just being in darkness, I would think.
Yeah, but is it? I mean, psychologically,
Yeah.
I would want to know what the effects could be if that was the case,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd want to know because like I'm at the moment trying to kind of not distance myself from psychedelics, but kind of like try and do more stuff sober, hallucinating, like meditation more and that sort of thing without the aid of psychedelics. But then the thing with that is you would integrate it more into your sober life. So if I did like 3 weeks in darkness and was tripping nuts, and then all of a sudden I turned the lights on, like I'd want to know that the tripping would kind of stop, and I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
oh, it'd stop. You'd probably die from that burst of light.
Yeah. True.
No, I mean, just think about what we're talking about, though. Like, yeah, we are talking about substances, but then right now we just diverted to potentially natural, sources of this. And if you think about it, something is like sitting in darkness for a few weeks or whatever, that could be replicate the same effects of a drug, or so it's weird to think about. So yeah, meditation, if you don't want to do anything, I don't blame you. These are intense, powerful tools, and some people are just not meant to do it, and also they do have some negative effects for certain people that are prone to schizophrenia and some different mental disorders. So it's not,
I think
it's definitely not something that you just play around with. That's for sure.
No, it's to get to these places. I think it's just the techniques you want to use are the things that distance yourself from your like sensory experiences. Like I work at a sensory deprivation tank place, and that's, like
nice.
People going, yeah, it's a cool place. And the guys who go there, like we have some people go there every day, and they are just operating on a like different level. They go in and they have convulsions inside the tank when they start floating, and they'll come out and they'll just, I don't know, they'll like see, they'll talk experience. To you. What, you've had it?
No, I was saying it's like a religious experience for
them. Yeah, exactly. But they've integrated it, and that's the thing. It's like they're doing it every day, and you can see the way they process you when they look at you and they talk to you is just very different to the way we do it. And I think they take us maybe less seriously or something. But
have you noticed a positive effect or?
Oh yeah, like a lot of them started maybe because they had anxiety or something like that, and that's why they they're recommended to go to the tank to calm down their minds from overthinking and whatever. And now that there's nothing for them to overthink about. They've got this thing every day that they have, which is like a reset for them. It's like, go to this place, and I know for an hour I'm just going to be disconnected from myself, or from this thing that makes me stress. And I have that every day. Like no matter what there is, this escape. I'm not locked into this serious feelings and these serious like anxieties and stuff. But I think you could probably get this. I don't know if it's DMT being released or if it's just your mind disconnecting from your yourself. One and the same thing again, maybe. But you got shamans and stuff who put themselves through intense pain and like start contorting their faces and things like that. And I think they do that because those are things you just never put yourself through when you're in control of yourself, when your ego is doing what it wants. And so when you force yourself to like contort your face and put yourself through pain, your mind just starts going to a different place. It's like, this isn't who we are. We are being, our body's stimulating something else. And then all of a sudden you're shifted into this, what people call a higher state, or this just different state of consciousness. It's interesting shit, man. And there's a
For
lot of
sure, for
experiments I
sure.
want to do. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and that's the cool thing about our mind is you can almost never stop experimenting. I mean,
yeah,
and there are certain, just gaining more knowledge and reading books and doing that kind of stuff. Like, there's so many things um, that I felt like when I started my own journey, like before we started this podcast, and when I started, reading and doing research and different things, um, I thought to myself, basically, I've got the other end of it. I've got the experience like taking some of these substances and, always being interested in like metaphysical things and different stuff like that. But I had never really um, put in the time and the research. So I started doing that. And that kind of propelled me to be interested in certain topics, one of them being this,
yeah,
now they're near death experiences and metaphysical stuff. And all that kind of stuff. But I think it's these are subjects that you can never stop talking about because, and the interesting thing about that though is a lot of people don't talk about these things. There are more people talking about them now. We have the internet, social media, so there's videos and your channel, which you do a great job of getting some of this information out there. But it's not a lot of main. I mean, if you pulled probably you know 1,000 people in random parts of America, most of them probably don't know what DMT is.
yeah, yeah. It's thanks to Joe Rogan as well for
Oh, boy, yeah, of
yeah,
course.
massive spread of DMT. But yeah, but
Well,
no, it's I don't know. It's like a psychedelic revolution going on at the moment. I feel like maybe it's because I'm like a part of the people taking psychedelics that it feels like a bit more for me than most people. But I think it is like with technology evolving, with psychedelics evolving. I think it's a shift in our consciousness. I think there is a big shift in our consciousness, and it's heading to something else. Maybe distancing ourselves from our animal-based minds a little more. Taking this reality a little bit less seriously and getting I don't know, like I think of it like the way that when someone takes DMT, their experience or the effects of their experience are actually pretty similar to someone who's going to be in VR for like a week. I noticed it because I got VR recently, and I'll stop playing that, and I'll be like, I'll still feel like I'm playing VR as soon as I'm out. It's like, okay, move my arm forward, pick up this object, and it's like, you can imagine 20 years from now, VR is going to be able to replicate
oh, we
the
could be in that right now. We could literally
yeah,
be avatars of some greater, our greater selves or higher selves
yeah,
or whatever,
yeah. Exactly. So this technology is stimulating our minds in the same way that psychedelics are. So even if you're not taking psychedelics, I think people's minds and their consciousness is still shifting towards a similar path. And yeah, there's this revolution of consciousness that's going on right now, and yeah, yeah, it's very interesting to see where it's heading.
I mean, it makes sense too. I mean, look, the first revolution, um, we it was more like the hippie movement, and it was political, and there's
Yeah,
a lot of different things going on. And I don't think people were looking at it from like they were talking about expanding their consciousness, and they probably did. But now I think looking back, we have a higher, or I guess a different perspective on what these things could be used for. Like we
yeah,
are looking at it in less of a let's do a bunch of drugs and go to music festivals, and more let's do these drugs and record what's going on or do experiments and figure out why this is happening. Can these things help people? Do they have medicinal effects? Which now we know there is positive medicinal effects in certain things. But they just the FDA just approved, I don't know if you saw that, the ketamine nasal spray.
Yeah.
oh
I
really?
yeah, I forget the name of it, but I've seen stuff. I know on Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, there's an episode on ketamine, and one high dose of ketamine can cure somebody's depression, like just one dose.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know how, if that's across the board or if it's just some people. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are a little bit more resistant, but it just goes to show you, even if it helps one person, two people, 10 people, whatever, it's been shown to do something, and there's the placebo effect obviously too. But Um, I find that interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think about what these mental illnesses are, like depression, anxiety, because I'm guessing ketamine does it because it's a powerful disassociative. So it just allows you to disconnect from all of those thoughts entirely, and then
Well,
get to another.
From having had severe OCD, I can tell you, you're absolutely right about the disassociative thing.
Sure.
And I will also say that a lot of these, at least I guess from OCD, from my perspective, I can't tell what's going on in somebody else's brain. Maybe this will hit home with somebody, maybe it won't. But it seemed like and I still have it a little bit, but I use it for positive things like, constructive work things or stuff with the podcast, whatever. But when I look back, it's more of like an ego driven thing. Like the OCD itself is very ego driven. It's like I got to preserve myself somehow, and you get in this like negative mind loop, and it just keeps going over and over and over again. It's almost like a record that you're watching it happen and you can't do anything about it. It's like two different parts of your brain, one working against the other one. It's very, very unusual.
Very interesting, that actually. Yeah, that would make sense. So like kind of a way to remind you that you exist, sort of thing.
Right.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I used to have OCD as well. More like where you have to just do certain things for some reason, otherwise you just couldn't feel right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird how and why we do that.
Oh yeah, mine was a severe. Organizing, cleaning, washing my hands. Got to be organized. Always worried. I was worried. About stupid things like getting the flu or getting sick. If shake
Oh
hands with
wow.
somebody, like stuff like that. So yeah, that was a more intense. It's like one you'd see on TV where these people are just like nuts out of their mind. I was like that for a little bit, and
Wow. Wow.
conventional medicine didn't help me. I know it helps a lot of people, and I know like CBT therapy and all that stuff does wonders for a lot of people, but it just did not help me, and I was resistant to that, so I had to try other means, which is trying some things that I had tried earlier in my youth, and they definitely, I mean, Maurice can attest this, is I'm not even the same person. I lived with him when I was going through that too for a little bit, so he knows how bad it was. And yeah, I mean, I feel way better. It's just I'm a completely different person, but I think it was a combination of learning and knowledge and just you know, getting back into the world of, okay, how can I fix this? Let's be a positive person, and less about, um, you know, the taking the Xanax and just thinking that it's like some miracle pill. Like you have to do work. If you want to get over anything, whether it's physical or mental or whatever, you got to put in the work. If you are capable and in the right mind enough to do that, that's the key right there to make yourself
Yeah.
feel better. It's
Yeah,
not
it's like it's a band-aid over a bullet hole.
right, right. And
Yeah.
even they found, some of these SSRIs and different things, and we won't go into certain stuff, but they have a little bit, like there's this thing called the Hamilton scale. So like getting a good night's sleep, eating healthy can move you like 6 points or something like that. And like taking a Xanax or a SSRI or whatever can only move you 1 point. So
Right.
like things that you do in your daily life that you have maybe bad habits would push you in a far better direction than taking that pill, that you think is doing all the work. So,
Yeah. I think obviously there's other medication. Like I'm not one of those people who are against prescription medication, but I think there probably
I'm
needs
not
to be.
either, unless it's
No,
been,
I know you're not. Yeah.
I just mean like the uniformity of it. Like it's not
Of course.
all those things are going to work for everybody,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Don't worry. It's just
Are you,
there are
bro? I'm getting the sense that you're not. No, just my.
that there's a lot of guys in the psychedelic community who are like very anti-prescription and stuff like that. And I think, as long as you're able to recognize that it's possible to be in a different mindset and then do the work to get back there on your own without the drug. Like sometimes if somebody's locked into a bad headspace with depression or something like that, and that's all they've ever known, and then all of a sudden they take a Xanax or Valium or something like that, and then things are different. They're like, oh wow,
things can be different.
For me, it was like take the Xanax or whatever it was. I tried different combinations over a few years and none of it worked. But
Yeah.
a lot of them are like go to bed medicine. So you take a Xanax at night. Well, guess what? You're going to go to bed pretty soon
Yeah.
after that, and you're going to wake
Yeah.
up, and it's going to start the whole cycle over again. And
Yeah.
what really happened during that? So I think it can be used as a tool, like anything else.
Yeah.
If you are having a panic attack or something where you
Right.
can't deal with it or can't control it, I think that's where that comes in. Like that's beneficial there. But then realize the next day you shouldn't just take it. You know,
Yeah,
you
it's
need to
not a
do the work.
long-term fix.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
I guess that's my outlook on it. Yeah, it can be useful, but how are you using it? Because I definitely think application matters.
And there's not enough support from the guys who are prescribing it to tell you how to use it. I remember in high school, I was going through a bit of anxiety and stress, and went to see my GP, and she was just like, "Yeah, I can prescribe you Valium if you want. I'm pretty sure that'll fix it." And I was like,
Yeah,
"Yep,
they hand it
sure." I
out
had
like
no idea.
candy.
Yeah, yeah, literally. And I had no idea what Valium was. I was like, "Cool." And I took it, and it was way stronger than what I needed. But it felt good. I was like, "Okay, I'm like, I guess I
Yeah.
can." Yeah, if it's been prescribed, I guess I'm meant to feel this good. And
Yeah.
I started just taking it, and eventually I stopped. Nothing had changed. As soon as I stopped, it was back to being exactly the way I was before. And I think maybe the reason why psychedelics work differently is because they don't make you always feel good. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they teach you through positivity and things like that. Sometimes they make you confront something real. And that can be pretty uncomfortable. I had a bad mushroom trip where that happened. And after the
If you're not
mushroom
in a good
trip,
headspace going into a mushroom trip, we're going to go through whatever you were thinking about that was negative leading up
man,
to it.
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of scared off of mushrooms since, but I was really grateful for the experience because I was having this conflict with a friend, which I just wasn't addressing, and decided to do the highest dose of mushrooms I'd done at that point. And then, yeah, like it was like, no, it was funny the way it manifested itself as well, because I was like, when the trip was coming on, I was like, I don't want to let go. I don't want to let go. And that's a short way to have a bad trip. And
Right.
I've
then
had it before where like you go in too, not to cut you off, but what you're
you're right.
saying, I had a similar experience. But then what happened was going into it, I thought these other kids like we didn't like pick sides or teams. I just felt like I wasn't connect to them, and that even though we were friends in regular reality, when we got into this other reality, um, I just thought that they were maybe not like talking shit, but like like me versus you kind of a thing, I guess, in a way. So I
Yeah,
definitely have felt that before. So that was probably my own issues with that person going into that experience, if that makes sense.
yeah,
So it depends on what it is. If you just had somebody like in your family die or something along those lines, yeah, that's probably not the best time to do it, because I'm sure it
yeah,
would be super emotional and terrifying at certain points. But I always tell people, always take it, least expected, but on a time where it's like on a whim, like, oh, it's a beautiful day out. Wouldn't it be cool if we just did,
yeah,
like that
yeah,
kind of a thing. Um, or from some, like if it's medicinal, I know some people take it medicinally too. So it just depends. But I think what you were saying about that, I think that resonates, because I mean mushrooms are very like that. I think it's very attached to your emotional side of things compared to some of the other psychedelics.
yeah, definitely. Um, I everyone can use it differently. There's some crazy dudes I know who are like, one guy was going through a breakup and he was like, okay, I need to take mushrooms because
Oh
there's
my
something I have
god.
to work through. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
he's like, I'm going to go 5 grams, I reckon. And just because he works at the tank place, he was like, and I'll go for a float. I
Holy
was like,
shit.
okay, tell me how you do. And he came out, he came out the next day and he was like, yeah, there's a really, really intense trip. That's all he had to say. But he seemed okay. Like,
Yeah. Did he
he
still
was still
talk
going.
about the girl?
Yeah, like there needs to be a lot of
What if he
information
just
during
forgot
psychedelic.
about her? Like, what if he came out of it and was like, yeah,
Who's that chick?
and just never
Yeah,
mentioned it again?
And they'd
yeah,
have an answer to breakups.
Breakup pill.
yeah, that'd be cool.
Pill and
No,
tank.
yeah, in the tank. He was nuts, and I don't think it did him good either. I think he may have been wanting the psychedelic to to be like a temporary, like to be a quick fix.
Yeah.
And you know, he said he was ready to go through that pain and get some solutions, but then it's kind of like you're asking the psychedelics too much. I feel like then you're asking the psychedelics to do all the work for you.
Right.
And I think that kind of came out for him because he seemed probably worse off after having that experience. But even
that's
though
exactly what we were just talking about too with the conventional SSRIs and Xanax and all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. It's you can't just take it. You have to put in the work too.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you feel like now though, I mean, it seems like you are on the path that, you know, these things aren't as necessary to achieve these higher states, you know, like we were talking about meditation and stuff. And
Right.
you said you've tapered off. Yeah, I mean, I haven't taken anything in a long time, and I'm not saying I won't. Maybe something comes up, but I don't ever plan on something like that. I've had enough of those experiences, and I do mean enough where I know exactly what's going to happen. And but I think that, like I said, you know, you said you felt like distant earlier. I don't, was that on the first one that we did or this one? But you said you felt distant from not having done it in a while, like distant from.
Yep. It's like the places I'm going to through my meditation, they are, and I haven't been doing it consistently for a while. So like your experiences of meditation sound like they're far deeper than mine at the moment, but I'm even like, it seems like I'm going to a different place to where I go when I take psychedelics. Like I'm learning similar stuff when I took DMT, and it teaches me, like it taught me positive thinking in an insane new way, which like I love it for that. And when I meditate now, I seem to get back into that same information and you know why should be positive and all the rest of it. But I think I probably have to stick with it for longer. All these
how long
techniques.
do you meditate for? Like how long a session?
Well,
like how?
So I'll do it daily for about 15 minutes, and then once a week I'm going for a float in the tank for an hour. So
All right, just try this. Just try it. Just my recommendation.
yeah, go for it.
Okay. You and I don't sit upright like with my legs crossed. I've tried that. It didn't really do anything for me. But the one that I find effective is kind of like this ancient secret mixed with somebody, you know, our grandfather who passed away, from his notes on his meditation and different stuff. So it's like a combination of things. But you get clean or take a shower. You're fasting in the morning. You haven't eaten or anything. You lay down. If you need to take a little hit off something, if you can get there on your own, get there on your own. And you either lay on like a couch or bed and just get in a relaxed state. I turn on these frequencies, you know, I don't know if you ever go on like YouTube, this like different hertz, like 528 hertz, or there's different things you can go on channels where it'll show, you know, binaural beats, I think they're called. But so I lay down, I listen to those tracks, and I get to that place. Now I do it for an hour. I don't do it every day. I do it like maybe once or twice a week. But when I do it, the experience is very intense, and you have like a certain level of like mindfulness going on. So, but yeah. So in terms of that's how I get there now.
When you're in it, what's your headspace like?
Okay, so it's like stages, and they're pretty consistent. So initially, when I start doing it, you know, I'm just trying to clear my thoughts, relax myself, not try and think about anything, and just you know, you can't not think about anything because, you know, even thinking about nothing is still something, but you do your best, you know. And I close my eyes to the point where my eyelids barely closed over my whole eyeball, but it is closed. So like you're focusing, that's what I use to focus, you know, like you're going to close your eyes anyways. I use how far to keep them closed and how much pressure to keep them closed as my focus. And after a while, you even forget that you're doing that. So you're almost like training yourself while you're experiencing this thing. So Once I do that, I get into it, and then I see like these like spotlights move around a little bit, and then from there, I don't know, man. I see weird shit. I mean, I could see. I'm not saying I have done this or anything, but I guess I don't know how it works. But after seeing this movie, Third Eye Spies, I mean, I could see how one could do remote viewing. I think that that is real, and I think it is possible if you trained your mind at such, you know.
Yeah,
Such
could you imagine if you put in 50,000 hours of pure meditation work, you know? What could you
Yeah.
accomplish with that?
right. So I mean, that's just my experience with that, though, and you know, who knows? I could just be my mind, you know, flooding with endogenous chemicals simulating what happens when you go to, you know, maybe my body thinks I'm going to dream soon or something, you know. I don't know, I have no idea
Yeah.
what's going on. So but to me, I've had enough weird synchronicity things in those experiences where I don't think that it is just a manifestation of my mind. And if it was, it would be more obvious. It wouldn't be these subtle little breadcrumbs.
Do you reckon, like, when we meet entities or something like that, that you're or seeing the reoccurring things, um, that it's like maybe your mind is getting tuned in, like you're changing your mental chemistry, something like that, so you're tuning into something else in the universe, like if you're an antenna or something?
Possibly. We've talked about that on here before too, that, you know, consciousness could be everywhere, and this our body's like a receiver or an antenna for it, and you
Yeah.
tune into a certain frequency and boom, you're there. And maybe there's other things on other frequencies, you know. So we know that we are just energy particles that are vibrating at a certain rate that are um, it's weird to think about, but we're all made up of these subatomic particles that are, you know, moving in a very specific way. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I do think that these other things are external things, at least to me. I know I saw my deceased sister all grown up, and she was a baby when she passed away. So the fact that I saw her all grown up in deep meditation, I mean, this was probably like 40, 45 minutes in. I thought this person was maybe like a Greek goddess initially. That's the appearance. But then I thought about it later, and I saw a picture of my deceased sister, and it reminded me like, oh, that's who that was. And it wasn't like, oh, putting two things together. It was just like this epiphany that happened, kind of. So
Yeah.
it was weird. It was a very weird thing. And I'm not like that. I'm not like, oh, you know, I don't talk like that. I mean, I
Yeah, you're
think,
rooted in science, you know.
yeah, I think things like that, and I think those things could be possibilities, but I'm not like one of these woo woo people that just thinks everything's possible, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do have somewhat of a governor on that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. What's your experience? Have you ever had something similar to a DMT experience in meditation, where you maybe had an experience with an entity?
Yeah. During a float once, I remember feeling like I was getting in touch with the same entities. Hard to remember though. It's for me. It's harder to remember the experiences during meditation when they get deep than when I'm on nothing than when I'm on something for some reason. Um, um, but yeah, you know, I try. We have this other thing as well at my at the center I work at called a ajna light. You know the ajna light?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are actually pretty expensive, aren't they?
Possibly. I don't know how much they paid for it, but it is
Yeah.
freaking dope, man. Like, it is
Yeah,
so
they're
sick.
LED lights that have a certain pattern, right? And it supposedly induces a psychedelic trip. Is that what?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
got to
and
get
it's
John to make these things for us.
yeah,
Yeah.
dude. It's legit wicked. I had this guy come in like at the center, and I think he just had a float, and he was like this. He was a real cool dude. This engineer who like he was studying for aviation and like studying at a master's at the same time of running this like massive engineering business. Like really like, you know, still pretty laid back guy. But wired into some stuff. And then I told him about the Argent light, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll give that a go." And I said, "I'll put it on for an hour. If you want to leave after 10 minutes, you know, whatever, do so." And he was in there for the full hour, and he came out, and he was like, "Man, that was like an acid trip, bro. Like I was tripping nuts." Like he was talking like that, and I was like, "Awesome." Some people though don't get that much out of it, but I found that, you know, if someone's resistant to the idea of going for a float or meditation, they can still get stuff out of the Argent light, even if they're not getting like transferred transferring the consciousness, they can still see like visuals and shit.
Right.
So yeah, give it a go.
That's cool. I thought you were actually going to say that they didn't see anything at all, because I was gonna say that kind of makes sense. Like if you think about people, like somebody that's doesn't believe in being hypnotized, you know, if they go to a hypnotist, they'll probably be more resistant, or it might not be as effective as if somebody was more open to it, you know. Like suggestion's a powerful thing, man. I'll tell you, you suggest something and it gets in somebody's brain, you know, that manifests into reality real quick. So but yeah, that's cool. I want to definitely try one of those things out. Obviously, you're not taking, if that can induce stuff that's already within you, or you know, endogenous chemicals or whatever, you know, obviously that's far more effective than making something or getting some weird stuff from somebody you don't know, or you know, whatever the case may be. So
I need to do some more research on it, because it's a real cool device. Like the visuals come really easily, because you know, if you're like meditating, or if you're in the tank and you're seeing something, and then you think about that and you're like, oh shit, whoa, like I'm seeing something and that's real cool, then it's probably going to disappear and you're just going to like return back to normal. Whereas like I remember doing the Arjun light for the first time and seeing shit, but it wasn't like imagination. It was more like just like closed-eyed visuals, like just things. No matter how much I was thinking, I just kept seeing them. And I think with the Arjun light, if you stop thinking, then those visuals can take you deeper, like meditation or sensory deprivation tanks. But have you guys had a float before?
No, my birthday's coming up. I think I'm gonna do it. I'm looking at some places right here. The tanks aren't cheap. Those things are like 30 grand.
Yeah. Why don't you buy one, bro? Why are you being such a pussy?
Put it right in my office, man.
Did you say you've done one, Michael?
I'll move back to Michigan if
I don't think no, Mike hasn't either. I don't think
I've never done it. No. I would be definitely open to it. I mean, I used to sit, you know, during the summertime in the pool and just close my eyes and just float on the top of the you know, water. Same thing where you're almost like droning out everything, and just, I mean, obviously there's people, but you block that out when you're, you know, there, try, you know. But yeah, I think being alone in darkness, experiencing that's a trip. That's for sure. You know, I would definitely try.
It's cool. Like, I think some people don't get too much out of it because like it's meant to be sensory deprivation, but because it's such a new experience, like you're floating on water and there's so much salt that you're not sinking underneath, you're just being like lifted, and it can actually activate your senses more than if you're just laying on the ground in darkness. But I don't know. I find it pretty cool. The guy who invented it, John C. Lilly.
I know, we know John C. Lilly.
Yeah.
Dolphin Master.
Yeah, we used to be. Well, there's this band Fish. You know, I don't know if you've heard of them. They're like a jam band. And the lead singer guitarist Trey started a side project called Oysterhead, and one of their songs was called Oz is Ever Floating, and it's literally about floating in the deprivation tanks, taking ketamine and, you know, all that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I know John Lilly used to shoot ketamine up at like high levels, and would what was that thing you mentioned earlier? There's a something bureau, and he thought there was some sort of bureau as well.
Adjustment bureau.
Yeah, he said something, I don't know if it was that, but it was something along those lines, where if you do enough of it, there's like these aliens that like adjust, like basically what you were saying before. So that's kind of weird. And actually, I am remembering something now. You said, okay, so something you said earlier about these entities. Sorry, I just thought of this, and this is way off topic. It was something you brought up earlier, but you just mentioned earlier these things like weaving reality together, or putting things together, like two different, you know, this or this. One of our buddies we had on, Ryan, we did an episode. He had a near-death experience, but it wasn't a traditional one where he was unconscious and saw this stuff. It was more that he almost died, and then the good things that came out of it and the experience that he had. But you know, he's had experiences as well. But he said one of his nurses gave him a book, and it was about something like how these elves or something like weave reality together. It was just, I forget exactly what he said, but it was just weird that like you mentioned that, and that's kind of what he mentioned too. So there's weird stuff going on. Like I said, I hear
Yeah.
different. That's why I like listening to people's trip reports, because even though I don't really trip anymore, it's nice to kind of connect the dots doing research on things that I already kind of know about, But
Yeah. It's crazy,
yeah, I
man.
just
Like, yeah, some people know what, like, they have consistent trips. One of the, like, there are a lot of people on um, commenting on my video, the Machine Elf one. People saying adjustment bureau. They'd be like adjustment bureau, adjustment bureau. Like, it's coming up a lot. And I think a lot of these guys are like, that's where I got it from. And realized immediately, like, yep, that's exactly the experience. And
right,
there's consistent places to go to. Like, there's consistent hell realms, consistent heavenly realms, and then there's like these similar entities, like jesters. Like, jesters comes up all the time.
right.
Yeah, and it's like,
I heard a take on that. Somebody wrote an article on some psychedelic website recently where it was a hypothesis that the jester goes back to like ancient times and what the jesters used to represent back then. It's this like part of your subconscious that,
yeah,
like a joker that's playing a trick on, so, and the article ended with something along the lines of, does it matter if it's real or not, if it's helping you get to that place, blah 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 blah.
sure.
But I thought it was interesting that they took that route, where it seems like people are hesitant to tell it like it is. And I'm not saying that person
Yeah,
wasn't. I'm just saying, in terms of telling it like it is from the standpoint of the experience, and then letting people perceive that the way it is, as opposed to like put it in a box and say, this is what I think it is. Even if
yeah.
he had that experience personally and that's what he believed it was, I can show you videos of people that thought that they literally were meeting aliens, so it's
Yeah.
different things.
Well, it's like, I never want to take a firm stance, and like, maybe I should do that more. But the jesters, I've heard people talk about it being an archetype, of our subconscious.
Yeah.
And I think I haven't experienced a jester before, but from the sound of things, it's a very different experience to meeting like these machine elves of the Adjustment Bureau, where the elves seem to have more of like, they conflict with your notions of reality more than like meeting the jester. The jester's just kind of like, oh, there's this part of my mind, or there's this thing I'm meeting that's fucking with me. Whereas these elves are like, oh yeah, this reality that you just came from, we're actually just doing this with it, where there's tons more that we're connecting them to, and we're fucking, like, it just head fucks you in a
Right.
strange way. And I had a friend of mine who'd taken ayahuasca, who said that they'd met similar entities. And language is limited. It's hard to know, like, if I share an experience with somebody, maybe they interpret it differently to how I mean. But at least what he explained sounded very similar. He said that he'd taken ayahuasca and then became one of these entities, and they were standing around in this room, or something like that, and they were looking at all these different realities. And then the entity that he was decided, he picked one of the realities, and he was like, yep, I want to enter this one. And then he entered it, and as soon as he did, he just woke up back into being himself again.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the trippiest shit, man. Like,
Wow.
it's like, this stuff is the biggest head fuck. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I like where it's headed though. I like what you're doing with the float tank stuff, and I like the Aja light, all that stuff. That's all. I mean, because look, um, there's going to be an evolution of this stuff. Just like, like obviously it's new to most people. Most people don't even know what DMT is to begin with. But then there's already people that have been so aware of it. Then it's like, okay, what's the next step, or what's the next level? Like, and maybe there's not. Maybe there will never be. I think about that sometimes too. Like, as much as we're learning, it seems like I have more questions now than I had before I
Yeah.
started this journey of, truth and knowledge and different stuff. So, I don't know. I guess
No,
we'll just
same, man. It's a hydra. You cut one head off and then two grow in place. It's constantly going. But I think what I learn is very helpful, and I think about where I was at before I ever tripped, and like, I am so grateful for coming into contact with psychedelics. It can get pretty chaotic, especially when you're doing it a lot, and I know when I did psychedelics, I didn't have like much in my life that I was really invested in. So psychedelics became the first thing that was like, wow, like this is awesome. And I just became all for it. So the more I could trip, the better. And, you know, that's not how I'd use psychedelics now. That's not how I'd recommend people to use psychedelics. But at the time, because it was definitely chaotic, but I came out of it, and the stuff I've learned and applied, I don't know, it just, it's so helpful, man. It doesn't matter if there's more questions to ask. I'm excited to get the answers, because the answers I've got so far have been pretty wicked.
Oh, I'm committed, bro. All right, I've already thrown my hat. I've already thrown my hat in the ring. Okay.
Yeah.
Even if there is no answer to the end of this journey, I'm still on it. I don't care. I told him, you know, here's the way my philosophy on life has been recently, which is, I want to believe in things, and I'm going to, and but I will do the research and look into things properly, and obviously deduct what I'm going to deduct. However, you know, believing in nothing, I don't see any value in that. Even if there is nothing, and I'm open to that idea too, that there is only this physical world and we are trapped in it. There is no life after death, and you know, if that is the case, I'm fine with that too. I already made my peace with that. However, I would rather live my life the other way, with some sort of like romantic ideas and hope, and you know, I just feel like there's a better quality of life there, at least for me. And I know everybody is different.
What are the romantic ideas you have?
Oh, just like some of these fringe things, you know, like is there a God? What could the God be? You know, it could be somebody that created us in a simulation. He could be pure white light energy. He could be, you know, it could be anything. I definitely don't think it's a bearded Zeus looking guy in the sky. That's what I don't believe. But I'm open to you know, other ideas, but just stuff like that. Like, is there a God? You know, like just the basic questions. What are we? What, you know, like the fact that we're here right now having this conversation, talking about this weird thing that's in our bodies that we can't explain, don't understand it, the effects that it has on us, like those types of things. Like that's what drives me now, is that I feel like there are people that are meant to like look into these matters, and that's just what my role is in that. And I think right now you see this movement of a lot of people doing that. There's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of people that want answers to things, and there's also, you know, a timeline that we were given going through school, which was an objective timeline about who was writing the books at the time. And I'm not saying like, look, history, let's just say 80% of it's correct based on what we know. That still leaves 20% of like some major shit timeline wise, you know, like how old truly was ancient Sumeria, how old truly did, you know, ancient Egypt, like how, you know, like the precursors to those civilizations, you know, stuff like that, like Gobekli Tepe's 12,000 years, like all that stuff, you know. But so that's what drives me. But I think that you're on the right track. You're a lot younger. What are you, like 25?
22.
22. Shit, man, you're way younger than I thought you were. You're super mature for your age, and I think that, you know, using the psychedelics the way you have and looking into the subject matter that you have has probably brought you to this point where you have a better outlook on the world than most 35-year-olds.
I know that like there's so many different truths that you can like adopt to face reality. And you know, I was like a nihilist basically at one point, and it just didn't do much. Like what life is like, civilization is like people battling with different concepts and notions of what reality is, and then whoever triumphs, that kind of becomes the new truth. Like so often that's the case, and it's like nihilism ain't gonna triumph. I'll tell you that, because it's not practical. It needs to be practical for it to be I don't know, to be a prevailing truth. Nihilism is just a self-destructive notion, I find, most of the time. Probably not normal.
So, they don't like you talking about that.
Here we go again.
Me,
Part 3.
What I like to use psychedelics for is to try and share a more positive outlook. And because I think positive outlooks is a very practical one as well. And like, I just know it works for me. If it works, there must be an aspect of it that's true anyway. So that's kind of what I'm using psychedelics for. And
Well, look, positivity breeds more positivity. And if I mean, look, when I go to like my office or I'm in business or something, so whoever's the the most positive or upbeat, you can see that, you can pick that person out of the room. You want to be around that person. They're like an attractor. Like, oh, you see somebody with a little bounce in their step. Hey, what's going on? You know, that person's like excited to be alive, you know? So like you can pick up on that sort of thing. So I think that you're right. And I think that having a positive mindset for whether you have mental illness or some of these things might be very hard to do, for sure. Like look, when I was in my deepest depths of despair and OCD, if you talking to me like that, I wouldn't have heard what you had to say, you know. But that just showed
you're ever gonna get better.
That just, but my consciousness wasn't in the same place, so I would not have been. So like this whole thing about like going through life and learning and finding your own way is true, because as much as we want to shake people and get them on the same page, and this is what I know, and you know it'll help you, like that person's going to have to find that out on their own. You know, that it's just parents do the best they can. Most of them, hopefully they're, you know, but at the end of the day, it's up to that person to, you know, write their own destiny, basically.
Well, your parents instill their ideas into you, so you got to venture out at one point, you know.
And you're not going to like.
Oh, you said something bad. Shut him right off.
All right.
Well, that was a good run.
Well, we'll call that a night, but we'll catch you guys next time on Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, and we will definitely have Jack back on in the future. So, peace.
That was awesome. Cheers.